They saw the tattoo and burst into laughter. A blazing red phoenix inked on the left arm of an old man working in the storeroom at the training base. It looked like something a retired biker would get, or some cranky old fellow trying to seem formidable. No one asked where it came from. They only watched him move silently as he unloaded supplies, head bowed, then sit alone in the corner of the yard, the kind of person everyone assumed had nothing worth telling, until a SEAL commander strode in, paused mid-yard, glanced at the man's arm, and suddenly snapped to attention with a salute. No one understood why. But from that moment on, no one dared laugh again. In their eyes, that tattoo was nothing but a joke, a ridiculous statement by someone trying to cling to a glory long gone. At Fort Leonard Wood, where uniforms are pressed to perfection and boots must gleam like mirrors, a large tattoo like that attracts stares rather than respect, especially when it's on the arm of a man whose true role no one knows. Raymond Booker, 56, used to be a Marine. Rumor had it he served in Fallujah and later supported operations at Delta Station, but nobody confirmed it. After leaving the service, he took an unremarkable logistics job, unloading supplies, inventorying shipments, fixing broken carts, and sometimes just leaning against the wall watching new recruits march by. He worked quietly, punctually, never complained. If someone barked an order at him, Raymond wouldn't react. He simply nodded, turned his back, and went on with his task as if it were as natural as breathing. No one ever heard his stories, no gatherings, no declamations, no medals hanging on the workroom walls. In a world obsessed with achievements, he had become nearly invisible. Young soldiers would glance at him and then nudge each other with chuckles. That biker old man, probably a Metallica fan, or worse, bet he flunked special forces and got sent here to the warehouse. Once, a junior sergeant caught Raymond doing a late-night inventory. Half teasing, he said, "Old man, you still can't navigate the supply system?" Raymond only smiled, hoisted a heavy crate onto his shoulder, and carried it inside as though he had heard nothing. Every morning, he polished his boots as if at a ceremony. Those worn shoes traveled countless dusty miles, were buffed to a shine, reflecting Missouri's summer sky. His uniform wasn't new, but always crisp, every crease sharp, no wrinkles, just like there were no excuses. The Phoenix tattoo was never hidden. Whenever he rolled up his sleeve to heft a heavy package, it sprang into view, brilliant, a flame part of his body, not a publicity stunt. Yet to those around him, it remained nothing more than a curiosity, a silent invitation to mock. At places like Fort Leonard Wood, where people quickly sort who's real and who's background scenery, Raymond fits squarely into the latter. No one asked where he came from. No one asked where he served. They only saw a quiet, patient, harmless black veteran moving crates. Still, on some late afternoons when the base emptied out, a few senior officers would step out of their offices and spot Raymond alone in the yard, eating a sandwich in silence. A few of them would watch him longer than usual, not because he was eating, but because of the way he sat. Back straight, eyes fixed on the distance, seemingly listening to something no one else could hear. Then they would turn away. To most young soldiers, he was part of the backdrop. But the more perceptive, often those who'd spent enough time in combat, sensed something off. Something about the way he stood, unbowed, something in his silence that was anything but small. But because he never spoke up, they never asked questions. After all, he was just the old tattooed guy. No one really thought that tattoo could speak for an entire hidden history. Who do you think he was before he became the warehouse man? And why did some officers look at him as if recalling something they'd once known? Share your guesses in the comments before you learn the truth in the next part.
Welcome to Veteran Hero Medal, where silent scars speak, honor lives on, and real heroes wear no capes.
No one expected anything out of the ordinary that Wednesday morning. The sun shone gently, as usual, Humvees sat motionless in the yard, and Fort Leonard Wood's logistics hub hummed with the sound of pallet jacks and keyboards entering inventory. Raymond Booker was still pushing a crate of ammunition down a ramp on his chipped-handled steel cart, sleeves rolled up, sweat beading at the nape of his neck. The Phoenix tattoo gleamed vividly in the sunlight, still the detail that prompted whispered comments whenever he passed. But that day wasn't just the junior enlisted present. A special SEAL team had just landed on the base. 6 of them, wearing weathered combat uniforms as though they'd come straight from the desert, exuding an unspoken chill, their footsteps silencing the training yard. Anyone with combat experience recognized their gaze tired yet razor sharp, as if always ready for action. As they made their way toward the supply warehouse to collect gear, the atmosphere shifted. Raymond was inventorying safety goggles when a shadow passed the doorway. He didn't look up, but one of the SEALs slowed his pace markedly compared to the others. The team leader, around 40, prematurely gray at the temples, a long scar tracing his wrist as though fired upon in a narrow hallway. He asked no questions. He simply stood, staring intently at Raymond's arm. His eyes widened, not from age, not from surprise, but because of the tattoo. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The others fell silent. No one knew exactly what was happening, but something in the leader's gaze made the air grow thick. Then he snapped to attention. No greeting, no formality. He saluted as one would salute an officer, his right hand firm, eyes unwavering. A young private nearly dropped his crate of ammo. Another let out a nervous laugh, thinking it a prank, then fell silent when he saw the other SEAL's expressions. Raymond finally looked up. His eyes were not surprised, only solemn, as though this had happened before. He returned the nod, a subtle, polite nod, and then bent back to his task. No one spoke. But after the SEAL team left the warehouse, the atmosphere had changed. Someone whispered, "I think that old man was with Raven 1. A name most junior soldiers had only heard whispered, a Black Ops mission scrubbed from official records. Those who went never returned. And no one knew who survived. From that day on, the way people looked at Raymond shifted. There were still laughs, but more hesitant. Still teasing, but quieter. And the senior officers, those who'd stepped out of dusty Middle Eastern bases, suddenly saluted him as they passed. No words, no explanation. Only one thing remained constant. Raymond said nothing, neither confirmed nor denied. He simply continued his work, sleeves rolled up to reveal that tattoo, a secret everyone had glimpsed, but no one dared to question. And perhaps the most frightening thought wasn't who he had been, but that if he truly had been part of Raven 1, why was he the one still alive? What do you think happened during Operation Raven 1? And why would a man like him vanish from every record afterward? Make your guess in the comments, but don't look away, because the next part will astonish you even more. Military bases always have their own rhythm. People come and go, training, marching, inspections, resupply, a closed loop where nothing seems capable of breaking in to create surprise. But some days, everything shifts because of a single look, and then the entire base will never be the same. The next morning, after the SEAL team had left the warehouse, an unnamed tension lingered in the air. No one voiced it, but everyone knew Yesterday's event was no accident. That commander had saluted Raymond, not the casual nod of acquaintances, but the formal salute of a junior to superior, respectful, unwavering eyes locked, and the warehouse man did not refuse. He returned the salute with serene composure, as if he'd been accustomed to it for years. Those who witnessed it said nothing, but their gazes followed Raymond longer than usual. Then the following morning, security camera footage quietly circulated among a group of mid-level officers. It recorded a SEAL in uniform standing at attention in the training yard, waiting exactly until 0700 and saluting a man stepping out of the logistics area. No one else was on the field. No ceremony, no formation, just two men and a silent ritual. The man being saluted was Raymond Booker. News spread faster than the scent of strong coffee at a Sunday breakfast mess. But this time, no one laughed. The same soldiers who had mocked him began whispering to one another, asking about the tattoo. Asking about the words Raven 1, a name heard only in wartime barroom whispers from Iraq. A mission supposedly scrubbed from all official records. Those who went in never returned, and no one knew if any had survived. So, why was he still alive? That question suddenly became an unfillable void. A few tried searching the system but found nothing. Raymond Booker appeared only as a low-level logistics clerk with no distinguished medals, no combat records, no trace that he had once been anyone. Yet if he was nobody, why did the SEALs salute him? People began to treat him differently. Hesitation when assigning him heavy loads, awkwardness when passing by without a nod. Even the jokes about his tattoo faded like mouths no longer sure of what they were saying. Raymond remained unchanged. He still arrived early, worked quietly, polished his boots, spoke no words. But people began to notice one thing. He never allowed that tattoo to be covered even during uniform inspections or internal audits. Perhaps that was his distinction. He neither flaunted it nor hid it, as if the tattoo itself was certification more than sufficient, requiring no further explanation. Then another story surfaced. A lieutenant who'd served in Nuristan quietly said, "I once saw that insignia on a blood bag pulled from a pile of rubble. Nobody survived that day, at least that's what we believed." The SEAL commander from the previous day did not reappear all week. But on Friday afternoon, a small military vehicle stopped at the command's office. A civilian-clad man disembarked, carrying an aura that made the sentries stand straighter. He strode into the operations lieutenant's office and remained there for 17 minutes. No one knows what was discussed. But immediately afterward, Raymond's file was marked internal access only in the system. When information is hidden, curiosity flares. And when a secret is spoken in silence, you know you are close to something far larger than yourself. What could make an erased operation leave its mark on a lone logistics man's arm? And if he truly was the sole survivor, why does he never speak of it? Can you guess what happens next? Relax for a moment, comment 1 or I'm still here, and let's continue. Every military base has its own strange, quiet hours when the daily rhythm slackens and familiar noises suddenly vanish. That is when people let down their guard the most. And at Fort Leonard Wood, that happened on a Tuesday morning. There was no warning, no alarm. Suddenly, the entire lighting system at the North Station went dark. A faint clatter echoed in the control center, then everything plunged into silence. Radar screens lost their signals, security cameras switched to gray, communications outposts went dark one by one. The duty officer assumed a technical glitch until a strong wind blew through the outer fence, carrying an eerie sound, helicopters flying without radio call signs. No one was prepared. Guards were cut off from command. Checkpoints froze like deserted islands. Only one post remained lit. Guard Tower 7. A small hut on the southern edge of the base, normally manned by a single night shift sentry. Its power was tied to an old auxiliary line long slated for removal. But for some reason it still worked. Raymond Booker was there. He had no official watch assignment. He'd simply volunteered to cover for a private who was sick. No one thought much of it, just a kindly old man willing to help. But unbeknownst to anyone, Raymond quietly inspected his rifle before the watch, replaced the radio batteries, and polished the scope lenses as if he was still in Nirastan. When the rotor blades sliced through the dawn mist, he showed no surprise. When metal struck chain link in the distance, he was already at the ready. His eyes narrowed, his hand tightened on the stock as though every muscle knew exactly what to do. The unmarked helicopter landed like a shadow. 4 figures disembarked, moving almost soundlessly, then split into formation with practiced precision. They carried no identifying patches, no name tags. They belonged to no recognized unit and certainly did not expect someone to be waiting for them at the checkpoint. Raymond fired the first shot before they could cut the fence cable. A cold, precise shot that felled its target instantly. The remaining 3 scattered. One threw a stun grenade, but Raymond simply turned aside, counting in his head. When he moved, it was as if gravity itself were someone else's concern. No haste, no hesitation. 2 more fell to 2 more shots clean, efficient. The last intruder crawled along the fence, seeking a breach in a side corridor. Raymond did not pursue. Instead, he circled, then waited. When the figure reappeared, Raymond was already there. The 4th shot ended the incursion. The entire engagement lasted 7 minutes. When the emergency response team arrived, they found only one man standing among 4 black-clad bodies. No signs of struggle, no labored breathing, only a gaze that seemed to have witnessed this before somewhere long ago. A young captain recognized him and froze. The response commander opened his mouth to speak, then fell silent. Someone restored the power. Someone began logging the incident. But Raymond said only, "Perimeter secure." Then he left the post, leaving behind questions far larger than any explanation. The next day's report confirmed it. The intruders were mercenaries hired to probe American-based defenses. They had succeeded at 3 other sites, but not here, not at Fort Leonard Wood, and certainly not at Tower 7. An internal access order was issued. When SOCOM reviewed the findings, they added a single note to his file: Booker, R. Raven, 1 clearance, still active, no further queries. So it was clear he wasn't just someone who had been anyone, he was still someone. If a silent sentry, without medals or battle stories, can still defend an entire base in 7 quiet minutes, would you still call him the warehouse old man? Don't look away, because what happens next week will be the confirmation no one dares imagine. The atmosphere at Fort Leonard Wood had never been so quiet on a Wednesday morning. No one spoke loudly. No one joked in the mess hall. Even the chants on the drill field sounded softer than usual. Something had shifted not only in the security systems, but in the way everyone looked at each other. Or rather, looked at him. Raymond Booker was no longer the silent figure by the warehouse. No one dared call him the old tattooed guy anymore. No one joked that he must ride a motorcycle or play bass in a rock band. Not because he flaunted his deeds, he never mentioned them, but because now his silence carried undeniable weight. Within hours of the thwarted attack, the name Raven 1 spread like wildfire. The new recruits who had mocked his tattoo began searching Google only to find nothing. No records, no documents, no campaign. Yet some senior officers quietly recalled in broken snippets, in half-closed corridors, that Raven 1 was the one name never uttered in daylight, and Raymond had been part of it. The next morning, an impromptu ceremony was held, not for praise, but in acknowledgement, quiet yet solemn. Under the gentle morning sun, rows of plastic chairs were set out. Those who once didn't know him rose, straightened their uniforms, and waited. Admiral Wallace flew in from D.C. unannounced. He gave no speech, no fanfare. When he reached the center of the parade ground, he raised his hand in salute, not the subordinate salute to a superior, but a soldier's salute to another soldier, back straight, eyes stern, hand unwavering. Raymond Booker, he said, who upheld the SEAL's honor in silence. No applause followed. None was needed. The ceremony was so reverent that even distant bird calls could be heard. Raymond stepped forward unchanged, still in his worn uniform, still with polished boots, still revealing that phoenix tattoo blazing in the morning light. When he stood before Admiral Wallace, no further explanation was necessary. A return salute, a wordless understanding. Then he turned and left the field as he had each day before. No speech, no linger. But what happened afterwards spoke volumes. The very recruits who had mocked him queued up to have their photos taken, not for social media, but because they feared they might forget that day was real. Someone tore down the mocking poster that had been stuck in the mess hall. Another man retrieved the small commendation he'd tucked into his pocket, suddenly remembering that honor was real. People began noticing the looks older officers gave Raymond, as if paying respect to a closed chapter of history. They whispered among themselves about that tattoo. And when no one could say exactly what it meant, they reached a consensus. That's not a tattoo. It's a symbol for anyone who stands firm when the rest of the world falls. A few days later, in a simple ceremony at the command center, his name was engraved on a bronze plaque in the main hallway, one of only 8 names ever enshrined there. No filming, no speeches, but every passerby paused, offered a quiet nod, as though a piece of history had just been rightfully restored. Raymond took no leave. He still arrived on time, inventoried supplies, repaired carts, and made coffee at 4 each afternoon as always. But now, whenever he passed through the main gate, the guards stood at attention in salute. No orders had been given. They simply did what honor demands. Shortly thereafter, the local news ran a brief story on the successful defense of the base. No one mentioned Raymond by name. No one showed his tattoo. But viewers could sense that something very real and very silent had taken place. So next time you walk past the military installation and see an older sentry standing tall, eyes carrying secrets you hope never to witness, salute first. And if you meet someone who's kept the greatest honor of their life unspoken, will you recognize it? Or will you pass by just as so many did before? No one at Fort Leonard Wood dared look at that tattoo with derision anymore. That afternoon, the wind lay still over the Missouri grass, and sunlight fractured into mottled golden beams across the old stones by the warehouse. Raymond Booker sat there, as he did every afternoon, quietly, neatly, with his boots polished to a mirror shine and a simple sandwich in hand. It wasn't that he had nowhere else to go, but this spot of stone by the warehouse under the shade of an aged oak had become the place from which he gazed outward and the place from which others came to see him differently. A group of new recruits passed by. They slowed. No one laughed. A few offered a quiet salute. The rest merely bowed their heads. But this time there were no averted glances. They did not see him as invisible. They saw as though confronting a living piece of history, unassuming, undemanding, yet solid and weighty as that stone. Raymond did not react. He did not need to. A man like him had no need for words. He simply tore off a corner of his bread, brought it to his lips, his gaze still fixed toward the drill field, where calls and footsteps echoed in measured rhythm, the future forging itself one beat at a time. Inside the warehouse, the faded print of the mocking poster, his tattoo labeled poser in red ink, had been taken down. No one knew who did it. But in the trash bin lay the shredded photo, cut into quarters and folded, as though someone had regretted it and wanted every trace erased. In the conference room, Lieutenant Colonel Jenkins, who had once ignored him, sat poring over the after-action report of the night's assault. It listed the shift handoff at Tower 7, the codename Raven 1, and a simple note, "Still active, lawful action. No further explanation needed." He muttered, "We've had a legend right here and never knew it." The next day, a small ceremony was held quiet, unobtrusive. Admiral Wallace presented Raymond with an honorary replica of the Ember Order and a silver-plated Raven insignia. He called Raymond the man who redefined the frontier of courage, not just for the base, but for the very meaning of honor in the modern military. Raymond stood and accepted, nodding once. He said nothing he didn't need to. In the eyes of those who watched, no one saw him as the same man he'd been. He was not someone left behind by time, but someone who had silently preceded them by light years only. They had never been patient enough to look straight ahead. When the ceremony ended, he did not linger. No reception, no handshakes. He returned to the warehouse, polished his boots, inventoried supplies, and walked between the crates of ammunition with his clipboard as though nothing had happened. But that late afternoon, as Raymond entered the warehouse, a single recruit waited at the doorway. He stood at attention, silent. When Raymond passed, the young soldier suddenly raised his hand in salute. Precise, crisp of his eyes did not meet Raymond Saw's. He whispered, "Thank you, sir, for that place, for letting us stand." Raymond paused for half a second, then nodded and moved on without looking back. But the phoenix on his left forearm in the glow of sunset blazed to life as never before. There are those who live among us, silent, unassuming, undemanding, but who once stood where life and death were separated by a single breath. They do not recount. They do not complain. They do not boast. Yet in a sudden moment, they are the ones who hold everything together. Raymond Booker's story isn't just about a warrior. It's a reminder that true honor doesn't need to be proclaimed to endure. It only needs to be seen at the right moment in the right way. If you've ever encountered someone like that in your family, your community, or on a quiet street corner, don't hesitate to show your respect. A nod, a simple thank you. It may be all they need. Thank you for watching to the very end. Leave a comment if you've ever known a Raymond in your life. Share this video so gratitude can spread. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story that touches the heart of America.